My name is Christian Ashley, a seminary student and servant of God, and you are listening to the Let Nothing Move You podcast, a proud Anazal Ministries podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the next episode of the Let Nothing Move You podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley. As we continue on through the book of Numbers today, concluding the book of Numbers, we'll be in chapters 34 through 36. We're starting in chapter 34, going through verses 1 through 29. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Command the people of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land of Canaan, this is the land that shall fall to you for an inheritance, the land of Canaan as defined by its borders. Your south side shall be from the wilderness of Zin alongside Edom, and your southern border shall run from the end of the Salt Sea on the east. And your border shall turn south of the ascent of Akrabim, and cross to Zin, and its limit shall be south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it shall go on to Hazar Adar, and pass along to Asmon. And the border shall turn from Asmon to the brook of Egypt, and its limit shall be at the sea. For the western border you shall have the great sea and its coast. This shall be your western border. This shall be your northern border. From the great sea you shall draw a line to Mount Hor. From Mount Hor you shall draw a line to Lebo Hamath, and the limit of the border shall be at Zedad. Then the border shall extend to Ziphron, and its limit shall be Hazar Enan. This shall be your northern border. You shall draw a line for your eastern border from Hazar Enan to Shepham, and the border shall go down from Shepham to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and the border shall go down and reach to the shoulder of the sea of Chinnereth on the east. And the border shall go down to the Jordan, and its limit shall be at the Salt Sea. This shall be your land, as defined by its borders all around." Moses commanded the people of Israel, saying, "This is the land that you shall inherit by lot, which the Lord has commanded to give to the 9 tribes and to the half tribe. And for the tribe of the people of Reuben by fathers' houses, and the tribe of the people of Gad by their fathers' houses have received their inheritance, and also the half tribe of Manasseh. The 2 tribes and the half tribe have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan, east of Jericho, toward the sunrise." The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "These are the names of the men who shall divide the land to you for inheritance: Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun. You shall take 1 chief from every tribe to divide the land for inheritance. These are the names of the men: of the tribe of Judah, Caleb the son of Jephunneh; of the tribe of the people of Simeon, Shemuel the son of Ammihud; of the tribe of Benjamin, Elidad the son of Chislon; of the tribe of the people of Dan, a chief, Buki the son of Jogli; of the people of Joseph; of the tribe of the people of Manasseh, a chief, Haniel the son of Ephod; and of the tribe of the people of Ephraim, a chief, Kemuel the son of Shiftan; of the tribe of the people of Zebulun, a chief, Elizaphan the son of Parnach; of the tribe of the people of Issachar, a chief, Paltiel the son of Azan; and of the tribe of the people of Asher, a chief, Ahihud the son of Shalomi; of the tribe of the people of Naphtali, a chief, Pedahel the son of Ammihud. These are the men whom the Lord commanded to divide the inheritance for the people of Israel in the land of Canaan." God first speaks to the people of Israel of how Canaan is their inheritance gifted to them by him. They had done nothing to earn the promised land, but the inhabitants within had done everything to earn having their land taken from them. Ultimately, the land was God's to give as he determined, since he is its owner and its creator. God had allowed the Canaanites hundreds of years to live in the land, cultivate it, and realize their need for him. In that time, the Canaanites had slaughtered children as sacrifices to idols, engaged in perverse sexual activities, denied guest right to foreigners and sojourners in the land, and allowed sin to become law. They had lost their right to the inheritance that God had gifted them through the common grace that God extends to all humans, and that he allows them to live, to claim God's dominion for their homes, and to decide on how they relate to God. Now Israel was to step up to the plate and wipe the Canaanites out in order to claim their new inheritance and make it far better than it had ever been under Canaanite rule. Now, also, when we look here, we see that when God sets the boundaries of the land, we will see that Israel, if we're looking at this historically, never claims all of this for their own throughout their entire history. I mean, just looking at Phoenicia and Philistia alone, being in the regions described here, they're never going to be fully under Israelite control. And if this weren't like an audio medium, I'd show a map of the region to show what God desired for the Israelites to rule over and what they actually ended up doing and taking control of because of their eventual apostasy. But since it isn't, I'll settle for asking you to check it out for yourselves, because what God offers them to take and what Israel actually takes are far different. Even under the extent of the domains of the kingdom of David and Solomon, They don't have these borders. But as we look at this land, we see it is vastly rich with different geographies that are perfect for food, perfect for shepherding, perfect for just living in general. There's great resources that they can have here. They've got plenty of bounty of fruits and vegetables and grains that can be cultivated here. There's plenty of animal life that will support them. They've got also access to 2 separate oceans if they have these borders. And it is a worthy inheritance, one well worth fighting for, but it is one that has never seen the light of day, even with modern Israel's borders. When we look at the oceans, just that part alone, how magnificent that is as an inheritance. There's a reason that we have the Suez Canal where it is in Egypt, because what that does is it gives access to the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean through a tiny strip of land that would require otherwise going around Africa. Israel has access to both of these oceans. And that's why when Solomon actually becomes king, he is able to promote as much trade as he does because of David's conquest. He has access to both seas. He has access to the Phoenicians who know how to make a ship. And so Israel can even prosper itself more by getting beyond the resources that it has in its own land. This is a wonderful inheritance, but it is one that they never fully realized. Now, some take this as a sign of weakness of God and that he failed to deliver the whole inheritance to Israel. This is somehow his fault. Others say that one day Israel will own these borders before the end of the world, while others say that these will be the borders of Israel within the millennium following the second coming of Jesus, ushering in the end of the beast's control after 7 years of tribulation. For the first, God nowhere promises here that Israel will obtain all of this land. It is an inheritance, and inheritances need to be claimed. And claiming it in this circumstance means fighting for it and fighting their own sin, but both of which are something the Israelites will fail utterly to do. So, as a result, they will not receive the whole inheritance. To the latter 2 arguments, these are possible. I'll throw them out there as possibilities, but harder to prove because, well, we're not in the end times yet. I mean, you can argue that we are. You can argue that we've been in the end times ever since, Jesus, ascended into heaven. There's different arguments all there. I don't take that view, but there are plenty of other people smarter than me who do. So I just say, check it out on your own. But this is not an end times talk. This is for the purposes of this. I take the argument Israel was willed the land by God as an inheritance, but they lacked the will to take all of it as they were ordered to do. And that's why these borders that we see here, if you're looking at a map like I am, they never achieve because they lack the will to follow God fully, which is what he asked them to do, which is a prerequisite to owning all of this land. And when we get eventually into Joshua and Judges, and we're going to see how tiny and pathetic and minuscule Israel actually is compared to what they should have had. And even in that line, they're still tiny and minuscule compared to the regions of the world around them. It's going to be as a result of their apostasy. It's going to be as a result of that they're not having enough faith in God to conquer the people he said he would let them win over if they just trusted him. Now, also here, we see God place Joshua and Eleazar as the ones in charge of dividing the land by lots and by need of the tribes as aided by the leaders of said tribes. He has them kind of set up as a committee here because Joshua is going to take over for control from Moses when Moses dies. And Eleazar, as the high priest, is going to bring the spiritual side of things into this. And to make sure that no one is unfairly represented, everyone from the 12 tribes outside of Levi, and they're going to get their inheritance in a bit, are brought into this equation so that they can figure out what to do. Now, notice God hasn't spelled out everything for the Israelites and expects them to do the work, which is precisely how he works with us. Before we get there, notice God says, okay, so Tyre and Sidon, Asher, you're getting that. Simeon, you're getting the brook of Egypt, and Beersheba, that's something they had to settle on their own. God expected them to figure this out for themselves. Now, every now and then, God, we can gain insight from him, through prayer, talking with fellow believers, or perhaps even hearing his voice. But rarely are we ever told exactly what we are supposed to do in great detail, which is one of the most infuriating parts of my relationship with him. And it's something I've continually had to ask forgiveness for because I want everything. I want the plan. I want to know how to do it. I want to know who I need to involve with it. And he's had to remind me multiple times over, no, I don't tell you everything. I tell you what you need to know. and the rest you divine yourself. Sometimes you're going to screw up, and that's part of the plan, by the way, is you screwing up. So get over yourself, submit to me. Now, instead, God uses leaders at this point in time and in their own point in time to figure out his will and then administrate the church to get that will done. Joshua and Eleazar have to figure out, okay, which tribe needs to go where, how much room should they have. This tribe is smaller than that tribe. That means they should have less land. This tribe should have more land. That takes work, and they've got to figure it out, and they've got to get messy and make mistakes. Get your magic school bus in your lives. And just as the same is true of leaders of the church today. There's not a single leader out there in the church who has a direct line to God like Moses had. And even when Moses had that direct line to him, guess what? God still didn't tell him everything. So if there is someone out there saying that they do, run away. That person does not know God because they are claiming things that are not theirs to claim. And after saying, hey, God revealed part of this to me, I see a vision for what could be, give them a little more credence, have a healthy skepticism about it, make sure there aren't any personal motivations that are being involved there, but God can still reveal to us what he wants to do. I'm not a cessationist. I never will be, because I see no reason for God to stop talking to his people, for God to stop delivering miracles to his people and allowing his spiritual gifts to be used well. But have discernment, know how to be led well and to lead well. Now, also, in the case of our own lives, we need to think about, okay, that's for leaders, sure. But also remember that God uses us to divine his will and bring it into the world, no matter how small. That nudging that we get, say, hey, talk to that person. They look like they need someone to talk to. They look like they're down. Or, hey, why don't you throw a little extra into the offering plate this month? Or, hey, why don't you offer less? Or, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. Those voices, those are small circumstances. But guess what? That voice ultimately comes from him, if it's aligning with his will. And that's something that we have to divine. That's something we have to think about for ourselves. Say, okay, does this line up with the God that I know? Does this line up with what God has told me previously? Does this line up with what, if I bring it to someone else, do they agree? That's not necessarily going to be a perfect way to figure out what to do, because sometimes people can give bad advice, but it can be a good way if someone is earnestly looking out for you to say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Like, God is righteous either way, whether he reveals the full plan or enough of the plan, or he gives us next to nothing. Either way, we submit to what he tells us to do. Israel at this time submitted to what he told them to do, and that was figure out where people need to go. Now we'll go from there to chapter 35, verses 1 through 8. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho, saying, command the people of Israel to give to the Levites some of the inheritance of their possession as cities for them to dwell in. And you shall give to the Levites pasture lands that are around the cities. The cities shall be theirs to dwell in, and their pasture land shall be for their cattle and for their livestock and for all their beasts. The pasture lands of the cities which you shall give to the Levites shall reach from the wall of the city outward 1,000 cubits all around. And you shall measure outside the city on the east side 2,000 cubits, and the south side 2,000 cubits, on the west side 2,000 cubits, and on the north side 2,000 cubits, the city being in the middle. This shall belong to them as pasture land for their cities. The cities that you give to the Levites shall be the 6 cities of refuge, where you shall permit the manslayer to flee, and in addition to them you shall give 42 cities. All the cities that you give to the Levites shall be 48 with their pasture lands. And as for the cities that you shall give from the possession of the people of Israel, from the larger tribes you shall take many, and from the smaller tribes you shall take few. Each in proportion to the inheritance that it inherits shall give of its cities to the Levites. So now that the land for the 12 tribes was being worked on, the land where the Levites would dwell amongst them had to be settled too. But they would not completely own the land. If you'll remember way back, I believe it was Numbers 18, God told Aaron earlier, he was to be their inheritance, as they led Israel to rightful worship of him. So even though they dwelt on the land and their children would be able to claim access to it, it was not because they owned it, but because God had established their homes as they served him. Now, in fact, if we factor in the total land mass of Israel and then show what percentage Levites actually occupied, and if you can trust this math, which I worked out a little bit of it, so you should definitely go behind me, is what I'm going to say there. It looks like 0.01% of the totality of Israel is what they owned, is what they actually lived in without being an inheritance. This meant none of them would have enough land to be able to use it completely for farmland or to make a profit off of it, requiring them to be dependent upon the sacrifices of the tribes that they were serving in order to survive. which should have forced them to do their job as well. Now, there is an allotment for pasture land, but that is for the sacrifices that they are not to use for a material gain. So they are dependent, number one, upon God, and number two, on the people that they are supposed to be serving. So this is a solemn reminder to them: get your acts together, know that everything you have comes from me, and then lead the people into worship, because you remember where everything that you have came from. And we go from there to verses 9 through 34. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills any person without intent may flee there. The city shall be for you a refuge from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation for judgment. And the cities that you give shall be your 6 cities of refuge. You shall give 6 cities beyond the Jordan and 3 cities in the land of Canaan to be cities of refuge. These 6 cities shall be for refuge for the people of Israel, and for the stranger and for the sojourner among them, that anyone who kills any person without intent may flee there. But if he struck him down with an iron object so that he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. And if he struck him down with a stone tool that could cause death, and he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. Or if he struck him down with a wooden tool that could cause death, and he died, he is a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. The avenger of blood shall himself put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death. And if he pushed him out of hatred or hurled something at him, lying in wait so that he died, or in enmity struck him down with his hand so that he died, then he who struck the blow shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. But if he pushed him suddenly without enmity, or hurled anything on him without lying in wait, or used a stone that could cause death, and without seeing him dropped it on him so that he died, though he was not his enemy and did not seek his harm, then the congregation shall judge between the manslayer and the avenger of blood in accordance with these rules. And the congregation shall rescue the manslayer from the hand of the avenger of blood, and the congregation shall restore him to his city of refuge to which he had fled, and he shall live in it until the death of the high priest who was anointed with the holy oil. But if the manslayer shall at any time go beyond the boundaries of his city of refuge to which he fled, and the avenger of blood finds him outside the boundaries of his city of refuge, and the avenger of blood kills the manslayer, he shall not be guilty of blood, for he must remain in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the manslayer may return to the land of his possession. And these things shall be a statute and rule for you throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. If anyone kills a person, the murderer shall be put to death on the evidence of witnesses. But no person shall be put to death on the testimony of one witness. Moreover, if you shall accept no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall be put to death. And you shall accept no ransom for him who has fled to his city of refuge, that he may return to dwell to the land before the death of the high priest. You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land for the blood that is shed in it, except by the blood of the one who shed it. You shall not defile the land in which you live, in the midst of which I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell in the midst of the people of Israel. Now, in these verses, we return once more to the concept of the cities of refuge. God designed these to safely provide a place where for people who had unintentionally killed someone else, so that they could remain there and be safe from the avengers of blood, who were obligated to bring justice for the death of their family member. This provided a haven for them to remain for the rest of their lives and stop the family member from spending the rest of their life seeking revenge rather than vengeance, thus giving both parties some peace in the midst of the ordeal. These cities were placed equally on both sides of the Jordan to provide plenty of locations for the accidental killer to flee to in order to keep themselves alive. And we'll see this later on. I believe it's Joshua, where we actually get the 6 cities. And this is, hey, here's where you're supposed to go. Now, notice also how this was meant for anyone, which meant this applied to both Israelites and any foreigners in the land. So everyone was equally protected by the law, showing that God, who made these laws outside of human hands, has no favoritism in his heart in regards to this matter. And also looking here, we see the title of Avenger of Blood nowhere is stated in the law as a law, and is merely assumed to already be in motion for Israelite society. Now, this custom is an ancient one. Multiple different cultures had it over time. It's gone to the point of a little too much in the especially shame honor cultures, especially in Arabic Muslim culture, where this becomes a huge issue because there is no city of refuge there. There is nothing to stop that person from trying to get what they see as justice. And under certain laws, they're able to get away with it. And this is not what God intends with stuff like this. This is supposed to be curbing of revenge. This is supposed to be curbing of human baser instincts. So he does. So at this point in time, this is something God doesn't condemn, the idea of an avenger of blood, as he himself uses humans to deliver justice. But there is an unstated desire from him, and some parts of this even outright stated, for the avenger to be required to deliver justice correctly. Don't be led astray by emotion. Don't be led astray by logic or reason. Be in the law of God. Be in his perfect holy law. So this is why there is a stipulation in the law to handle something not mentioned in the law, that being the avenger of blood, to prevent the avenger from committing a sin by murdering the accidental killer who has done nothing wrong. They're simply a victim of being in a fallen and broken world. And they accidentally push someone down in the way where they knocked their head on a rock, or they threw something and they didn't know someone was standing there and they hit them right in the head and they didn't make it. Like in such cases, the Levites and the judges of Israel were required by law to judge the situation and the ones seeking asylum to make sure that they were not being taken advantage of so that justice could be delivered. Now, we are given examples, like I mentioned earlier, and what scripture mentions of how someone could accidentally kill another, through pushing someone that resulted in the death of a fellow worker. Like no one was around to see the blow. So who's going to believe the unwitting killer? Thus, to prove his innocence and preserve his life, he flees to the city of refuge in order for justice to be brought and his good name to be kept safe while also preventing his murder. Notice also how this requires that 2 or more witnesses must be presented to bring this to pass either way. This is done to prevent one man's accusation from creating a mob and is intended to prevent people from being paid off to lie, which is earlier forbidden in the law. Had this only taken the advice and witness of one person, well, anyone with a grudge can say, well, he did it on purpose, because they've got a reason to see this guy dead anyways. Now, is it still possible for this to be done incorrectly? Yes, because humans are humans. But the spirit of the law is that these witnesses are to be vetted, they're not to be paid off, that they are actually delivering truth, so that when this call is made, truth and justice is brought into the world. However, if malicious intent is proven, the man was to be put to death because he had intended violence and had murder in his heart, and thus had proven that he cannot live in society if this is how he handles his violent impulses. So the only righteous thing to do is to put that man to death. This is one reason why I do believe in the spirit of the death penalty. It's a flawed system. We're flawed people. Sometimes things go wrong, but I believe in the spirit behind it, and I believe in it being actually done in a correct society. There are simply people out there who cannot live among us, cannot live in society, and will abuse every law in place to cause harm and death to others. So the most moral and kind thing we can do is sentence them to death and then commit to it, because we are not committing to murder ourselves. We are committing to the killing of that person to prevent further sin. That is why it can be justified. That is why it is right to do so. Now, there is, rightly so, a criticism levied against thoughts like this, where there have been men and women put to death because of fake evidence or false accusations. However, proponents of this then twist this into the idea where there should not be a death penalty at all, because people have been unfairly accused and put to death in the past. Happens multiple times over throughout human history. Just America alone, the amount of young black men put to death because of dalliances with white women, or because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time and a racist wanted to get them killed, that is on America. That is on us. Blood has not been avenged in those cases because justice was not handled. Or in many cases where someone has enough evidence faked to get someone that they want killed or put into prison, that's on us as well. That's something that needs to be addressed. That person being put to death, there is no justice there because the justice system failed them. So I get why people would say this, but they go too far in the other direction by trying to get rid of the death penalty completely. And I will grant them that humans have made the wrong call in the past, and innocent people have died for a crime that they did not commit. 100%. I'm with you there. I'm not with them, and I strongly disagree with the leaps in logic that have been made then to then deny the death penalty, period. Because we have to create a safer world through the laws of the land, and we must have courts that deal out justice and are not affected by the sinfulness of men. That is an impossibility in this world, because guess what? Once again, humans are humans. But then if we just say, oh, well, there's no point to it, then we end up in anarchy. We end up in situations where murderers are let free. And I cannot abide by that. I cannot live in a world like that and encourages that thought, because that world encourages evil, that encourages sin. And this requires that we have lawyers, judges, and juries that are committed to truth and exploring every angle possible, so that when we do sentence someone to death, we are absolutely certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the criminal and that they are worthy of the sentence. And once again, humans are flawed, and we will never have a perfect court system. But that doesn't mean that just because we are flawed, that we let murderers, rapists, and traitors run free in jail for the rest of their natural lives at the cost of the citizens who must be protected, especially when people like them are granted opportunities of parole. The prison system is a recent modern phenomenon, considering the totality of human history. Typically, back in the day, you get your arm chopped off if you stole something, what have you, or if you murdered someone, they just outright killed you. It's only more modernizing as things have gone on. If you're wanting to rehabilitate people coming from a very good place, of wanting to see people succeed, of wanting, some of this is also motivated by Christian ideology of wanting people to see the truth of the gospel and being brought to Christ. And plenty of people have been brought to Christ in prison. I know some great people back home in North Carolina who work on prison ministry and are working actively in the lives of people there who need Jesus and have come to faith in Jesus as a result of this. And I applaud their efforts. And that only exists because of the prison system we have here. But it is an ineffective system. It is an imperfect system. And we need to realize that just because something is imperfect doesn't mean we give up on it. Because guess what? You and I are imperfect people. Even after being saved, I am imperfect. I am not where I need to be. And I don't give up on myself, because when I give up on myself, I end up right back where I was before Jesus. I end up right back where I was, where I don't care about other people, where I just care about myself. And because I care about people outside of myself, I want them to be safe. I want them to be cared for. And we can have arguments against my points another day, but this is where I stand. And I would really argue this is also where God does, because this is his law, not delivered, not created by human hands. And if they're created by human hands, then we need to have a discussion, but I highly doubt that. And we are to follow his moral law. This is part of the moral law. This is not a civil law. This is a moral law. God takes this extremely seriously, because that murder pollutes the land. And allowing that murderer to remain alive or be ransomed out is anathema to him, who desires his vengeance in his perfect justice to be delivered. Allowing men and women like these sinners to remain alive in an open rebellion is antithetical to running any society, and especially one where God is to be feared above all else. Now, who we here in Anazal, one of the sayings is we believe Christian nationalism is a heresy. I believe that to a point. I'm not in the Republic of Gilead or whatever the Handmaid's Tale is, where, God, what a depressing series. Needlessly so. That misses some of the own points it's trying to make. That ultra theocracy, it's something that's never going to be done in this world. I think the law should be influenced by Christians. Christians should be willing to engage with the law, should become lawyers, should become politicians in order to shape that law. So that's where I go a little more Christian nationalism, but that's also where I stop. There are some people who want Christian monarchies and outlawing and slaying of people who aren't Christian in the land. And that's like, okay, you're really losing me there, because you're missing the point of the gospel at that point. So if we are doing our jobs in this scenario, say there's a murderer out there, there's a serial rapist, there's a traitor who has brought death to American citizens in some way, shape, or form, or to any other nation for that matter. If we're doing our jobs, that also means that there should be someone, a Christian, reaching out to this unrepentant sinner who speaks to them the truth of Christ in the hopes that they will repent, which they did not have back in the day, by the way, but we do. But we also need to say that regardless of that outcome, regardless of whether that person repents or not, justice must be delivered. Life has been lost. There's forgiveness of sins, but there's also justice that needs to be delivered in this court system. Once again, you can agree or disagree with me. We can talk about that later on. I'd like to hear your opinions, but that's where I stand. Now, also as part of this, we don't see anywhere in Scripture where these laws are utilized. But simply because this doesn't happen on screen, as it were, it doesn't mean that they never happened. God made these rules in advance, knowing they would need to be used. So while we don't have any stories of them being utilized, there are hundreds of years of Israeli history that aren't fully fleshed out. So there are plenty of opportunities for this to be done, yet not covered in the biblical narrative. That's also true that it means that it's also hundreds of years where there was no reason for these laws to exist because there was no time that ever happened. I would grant someone that, but I find it incredibly hard to believe that at no point in Israeli history did these laws have to be used. So I say this because I have heard people say that these are useless laws simply because we don't see them utilized in Scripture. And as a result of that, I question their logical and reasoning skills, because God meant these rules when he delivered them to Moses before they entered the land, and he never does anything without a purpose. Even if they never got used, can you not see God behind these rules? Can you not see a God that desires justice, that desires for murderers to be sentenced for what they've done, for the innocent to be avenged? The same God that heard the earth crying out at Abel's slaying at the hands of Cain and brought justice to Cain on his time in accordance to his will before the law was made? Is that not the same God saying, hey, also, by the way, this isn't only for Israelites. This is for sojourners in the land too, because I am a God of all nations, not just you, Israel. I love these people, even though they defy me openly every single day. Even when you defy me, I make these laws for your sake. This is not written and crafted by human hands who are imperfect. This is written by the perfect God for our sake through the hands of his prophet Moses. And he does this to bring his will into the world, to show his character. The loving nature of God is revealed all throughout this law if you actually take the time to pay attention to what he's saying. To just call it useless because it's never brought up again is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life, because clearly you're not understanding what God intends through this. Would I have liked there to have been a story in the biblical narrative somewhere of the actual history of this being used? Sure, be great. But God chose in his sufficiency of Scripture not to bring that here. So I take what he gives me and I wrestle with it and I hold true to it. I suggest you do the same if we want to take this trip with him seriously, if we want to take this journey with him seriously. Now, we'll end today with chapter 36. We'll be going through verses 1 through 13. The heads of the fathers' houses of the clan of the people of Gilead, the son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of the people of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses and before the chiefs, the heads of the fathers' houses of the people of Israel. They said, the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land for inheritance by lot to the people of Israel, and my Lord was commanded by the Lord to give the inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, to his daughters. But if they are married to any of the sons of the other tribes of the people of Israel, then their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of our fathers and added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry. So it will be taken away from the lot of our inheritance. And when the Jubilee of the people of Israel comes, then their inheritance will be added to the inheritance of the tribe into which they marry, and their inheritance will be taken from the inheritance of the tribe of our fathers. And Moses commanded the people of Israel according to the word of the Lord, saying, the tribe of the people of Joseph is right. And this is what the Lord commands concerning the daughters of Zelophehad. Let them marry whom they think best, only they shall marry within the clan of the tribe of their father. The inheritance of the people of Israel shall not be transferred from one tribe to another, for every one of the people of Israel shall hold on to the inheritance of the tribe of all his fathers. And every daughter who possesses an inheritance in any tribe of the people of Israel shall be wife to one of the clan of the tribe of her father, so that every one of the people of Israel may possess the inheritance of his fathers. So no inheritance shall be transferred from one tribe to another, for each of the tribes of the people of Israel shall hold on to its own inheritance. The daughters of Zelophehad did as the Lord commanded Moses. From Mahlah, Tirzah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Noah, the daughters of Zelophehad were married to sons of their father's brothers. They were married into the clans of the people of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in the tribe of their father's clan. These are the commandments and the rules that the Lord commanded through Moses to the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho. Now, earlier in Numbers, if you recall, the daughters of Zelophehad had rightly noted that there was no provision in the law to protect them so that they could have an inheritance for themselves if there was no male heir for their father. And God allowed that situation to arise to test Moses and Israel. He does so again here. There, they had passed the test well by submitting to God's will and listening to instructions. Here, they are presented with a new issue that arose from solving the old issue that they hadn't thought about, which is typical of life. You think you solve one problem and another arises because you solved that problem, because we live in a broken, fallen world. And God allowed this so that someone would go, hey, wait a minute. Well, according to the law, if they do this, then the tribal inheritance will be lost. So, we better bring this up to Moses. We better not just make a ruling on this ourselves. We need to see what God has to say on it. So they all passed the test. Again, since inheritance came from the husband, if women married outside their tribe, that meant tribal land inherited by the women through the prior law was now obligated to be part of the new tribe since they had married someone from that tribe. And when the Jubilee occurred, this would happen as well because inherited land was not part of that process, only purchased land. So in order to solve this, God commanded through Moses that if women in this specific scenario married a man, it had to be someone she chose, but from her own tribe. Notice how much power this gives the woman in this scenario and how God speaks to them having a say in the matter, which is utterly revolutionary for the time period. Find another culture out there that had the same law like this in the system. Find another culture out there who cared about women as much as God's law does, as much as God's heart for them does. They get to choose their husband as they think best. Can you imagine any other woman in any other culture having that right? Well, you can't, because there's only one. It's one where God was involved. This keeps them safe from being manipulated by the intertribal conflicts that would arise, and ensures that the inheritance that all of Israel is supposed to uphold highly will be treated well. The reason they care so much about this is because God told them to care. Hey, you are supposed to have your tribe. That does not mean you can't have intermarriage between tribes, but it means that there are rules in place so that this tribe keeps its identity, keeps its land that God has given it as an inheritance. So hold to these things fast. Hold to these things truly. Have a high view of these things. And the people in the half tribe of Manasseh prove that they have a high view of this by bringing it up before Moses and God, which makes him immensely happy, which is why he delivers what he delivers. And we get such a happy ending here for all the daughters of Zelophehad, that they're able to find someone very quickly within their own tribe and marry them and continue to have their father's inheritance be controlled within the tribe, showing their devotion to God as well. And it's with this that we end the book of Numbers, as commanded by God through Moses, to be written down for the people to know as they're about to go to the promised land. Here's a lot of setup for what's to happen here. We're going to have Deuteronomy as the final setup before the war to obtain their new homeland. And it's going to follow, new rules, clarification on old rules, prophecy of the coming of Christ, and exhortations to be strong and courageous. But for now, the people are getting ready for what is to come. And that's a huge part of one of the themes of the book of Numbers, is not only to show how God has increased them, how God has watched out for them, but that they are to be his, and they are to have a heart set on what he desires them to do. And he's spending this time. Think of these matters. Resist temptation. Punish those who sin. Because if you don't, and you enter the land with hard hearts, with hearts that aren't following me, evil is going to abound. And guess what happens? Because they don't take it seriously, because they don't fully follow God with their hearts, evil abounds and they don't get the fullness of their inheritance, which God warned them about multiple times over before they even stepped foot in the promised land. So when that does happen, they have no one to blame but themselves. But for right here and now, they are devoted. They are committed. And so when we start Deuteronomy next time and we see a recollection of the events, it's not just boring retellings of what's going on. It's Moses and God reminding the people of Israel, hey, this is where you started. This is where you were. This is where you are now. You are my people. I'm not letting you go, despite your constant rebellions, despite your not following me fully. So take heart. You've got this if you just trust in me. Now, we're not told to conquer the land of Canaan. It doesn't need to be done anymore. But we're told to do other things. We're told to go out and minister to people in need. We're told to evangelize. We're told to make disciples. We're told to baptize people in God's name. And God expects us to have the same amount of courageous strength in that moment too. So whatever it is that he's telling you to do, it can be done. It's going to be scary. There's going to be times you think you're inadequate, but learn from their inability to do what needed to be done. And learn from when they were actually following God. What could be done if they did? Does that mean that guarantees success for us? No, because this is a very specific scenario for them. But God does guarantee that we'll be rewarded for what we've done, not in a prosperity gospel kind of way. I'm still waiting on that money for my times of faithfulness. because guess what? Prosperity gospel isn't true. But it does mean that he's going to remember what we've done. It does mean he's going to praise us for what we've done. And he's going to be with us wherever we go, just like he was for the people of Israel. So guys, thank you for being through yet another book of the Bible. We're on to the next book of the Pentateuch to completely finish the Pentateuch. Really excited for that. Please, if you get a chance, leave a 5-star review in your podcasting platform of choice. Help us with the ratings there, find more people. As well, please feel free to share the show with your friends, family members, neighbors, whoever wants to listen. If you're interested in my own fiction writing, you can find my works at starvingwritersguild.com or on Amazon by searching for the name MC Ashley. If you're all interested in some further solid studies into the Bible and its teachings, then check out the other members of the Canaan Israel Ministries podcasting network. You can find me specifically on systematic ecology, why I don't like, Friday Night Frights, and some joyful noises. Contact me at let nothing move you podcast at gmail.com. I'd like to extend a special thank you for Joshua Knoll for the editing that he does and for the music he adds to the podcast. And with all that in mind, God bless you on accordance to his will and not mine. Allow me one more time to remind you, let nothing move you.
Hey guys, are you interested in podcasting but don't know where to go? Well, check out Zencaster.com and go ahead and make an account there and use special promo code Let Nothing Move You, all caps. That way you can get 30% off of your next deal to go ahead and set things up so you can figure out how to edit stuff using Zencaster.com to host your stuff, to get things done there. So check out Zencaster.com, use special promo code Let Nothing Move You. All right, see ya.